Welcome everybody to Aeon Byte and welcome to the desert of the real. I hope you enjoyed that clip from one of the most MK Ultra mystic Gnostic movies ever, Jacob's Ladder. And it's definitely only for those watching right now because we are behind the paywall. This is a sub only show, at least the live version, the complete version. And it shows us, well, in short, that we got to turn those frowns upside down. We can alchemize those archons. Wetiko holds the gold, the dragon's gold that will save us. And I think it's an important message. And again, happy solstice. I think I've been calling it solstice. I think I've been telling people happy equinox on this March 20th. That's when we are recording the show. My name is Miguel Connor, and it is good to see everybody who is a sub who's joining us on this very special show. Again, if you are watching the replay, please subscribe for the full thing to be able to watch it the day it comes out and to be able to ask questions without worry of any super chats. Just tell us what's on your mind and we will do our best to get to it. And I'm very excited today, as always, on this equinox, on this March 20th, to have once again the amazing Saul Luckman, who will be talking about his book, Get Out of Here Alive, which is released today. Saul, as always, thanks for joining the virtual Alexandria.
Oh, I love the virtual Alexandria. Thanks for having me, Miguel. It's good to be here.
Good to have you as always. And it's always good to have a Graham Pong as he subs for Vance, who's busy with his day gig, his Clark Kent manifestation. Graham, how are you doing today?
Oh, pretty good, Miguel. Trying to still pay off those overdue library fines to the library. So,
So it's like the famous skit from what's the name of the show? The Library Police. I forgot the name
yeah,
of
I
the
was going to
show.
say, I don't know if anybody, I don't know if anybody gets out of here alive, but they don't get out of here without paying their past due fees.
No,
That's
they
for
don't.
sure.
They don't. And God forbid they come at us for our Columbia CDs that we never paid for, or DVDs. I'm still worried about those. But
Yeah, so you don't have to pay the ferryman, but you do have to pay those Alexandria Library overdraft fees or late fees, and some of those are thousands of years old.
yes.
Don't I know it, man?
Everybody, yeah, we all got to pay. We all got to give the devil his dues, or as Jesus says in the Gospel of Luke, you shall not get out of here until you pay the last farthing. So he wasn't whistling Dixie. And yeah, speaking of Alexandria, what's the big news that they found all these chambers under the Great Pyramids at Giza, 8 columns with rows that go down like 2,000 feet. And it's possible through this technology that these Italians are doing that there might be like a blocks of a city underneath. It's like, whoa. As Chris said, we really don't know anything about the past. And we're just learning. And again, what we're learning is that it's very costly because it looks like those Egyptians were creating a lot more with technology that is unbelievable than before. But anyway, amazing times we live in, as always. So as people get to the chat, we got a few people. And for the audience, check out Saul's interview that we did back in December. A sort of a summary of 2024 and predictions of 2025. We sort of touched on Saul's book. We gave you a taste, but today we will let it all hang out. And what an amazing read it is. It's like the grand theory of everything to wake up, or as I said in my review, it really is about the hero's journey, because that's how you find out who you are and what reality is not. So Saul, tell us about your new book that just came out today.
Well, the most important thing is that this guy named Miguel Connor left a review that's on the cover of the book. So, that's all you really need to know.
Indeed, indeed.
Well,
And
I liked what you said though. I mean, we were talking about this before we came on the air here. You said in your review it was a rewarding and useful map for the hero's journey, and I thought that really just kind of drilled down into what was essential about the book. Is that the book is about the hero's journey. I explicitly use this motif to talk about what it means to be in this place, wherever and whenever it is, and what it means to strive to get out of this place, whatever that means. So I appreciate your acumen in being able to discern what was going on in this book, because there is a lot of information packed into a relatively short volume.
there is indeed, yeah, and, what I like about it too is, yeah, you offer the map, but you also provide the exercises. A lot of people will tell us what the problem is, and that's fine. Reality is very brittle, and we need to understand that, and we need to understand that we must go on a hero's journey and know ourselves and what our purpose is and what our gift is to the universe, but they don't tell you how to do it, right, Saul? You actually provide these are the options that will work for you, and these are the different paths. And as make up your own damn mind which what you want to do, but here they are on the table if you wish to follow this path.
Yeah, it's that's a good way of putting it. When we talk about the Library of Alexandria and kind of the modern iteration of that, with all of the podcasts that are going on and this proliferation of information, on the one hand, I think it's very positive and it gets people to think on different wavelengths and different directions, to open up, to awaken, to empower themselves very often. On the other hand, I feel like so much of what's going on is this compartmentalization on steroids, where it's a niche inside a niche inside a niche. And so finally we're going to get to where we're talking about the fleas at the bottom of the columns of the Egyptian pyramids, and it becomes more and more meaningless as we drill down. I remember this phenomenon when I was in graduate school. This was happening decades ago. People were writing dissertations on the most obscure, meaningless topics you can imagine. And I see the same thing playing out today in Podcastalandia,
Mhm.
frankly. And so what I set out to do in this book is to say, well, okay, we could talk about different permutations and theories of reality all day long, but let's drill down into what I think is going on here, what I think it takes to wake up to that fact, whatever it is, and then the steps that we can, the pragmatic, practical steps we can utilize to increase our energy, our awareness, and our chances of actually flying this chicken coop.
Very true. In fact, that was one of my questions, or one of my notes here. You talk about, yeah, we're just talking about how everybody's got to create content or go down this rabbit hole, and today is the next big thing, but we got to tie into all the other big theories of conspiracy and psychology and politics. But you talk about that simplicity is integral or important in the hero's journey. As it's paraphrasing, it's a non-negotiable requirement for undertaking the inner hero's journey and moving beyond the mind control of the dragon. We can get into the dragon. So I guess the question is, how do you keep it simple? I mean, I know in Alcoholics Anonymous, they always said, keep it simple, because we create all these scenarios and grand designs and excuses. At the end of the day, it was just a bunch of excuses. And they always said, keep it simple, not cinco. What's your advice on keeping it simple, especially with all this information?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it opens up a lot of different topics in the book. One thing I'll say is that there's this shamanic concept that as you increase your power and center yourself more and more, you learn less and you learn to forget. It's essentially what you're doing, and you are letting go of information because so much of it is useless, and it attaches to parts of your psyche and your behavior that just that keep you stuck in a certain rut, a mental and a mental kind of dead end. And so a lot of what I'm proposing is that we don't need all of this information. We don't need all of these kind of top-heavy information heads debating this and that. We need people acting, and what I mean by that is going internal, going on the inner hero's journey in order to get out of here alive. So you're going in to get out, out through the outdoor, sort of a Led Zeppelin riff
I got it.
there, right? So that's the whole premise, and the things that one can begin doing to go on this hero's journey include evaluating where your time is wasted. Where is your energy diverted into things that don't serve you? Where are you being depleted? Where are you a hamster on the wheel? Where are you jogging on the treadmill? And begin to just do uh, the beautiful shamanic act of not doing. Just
Mhm.
step away from things that are dragging you down and see how you feel. It's that simple, really, to start this whole process. There's nothing complicated about it. There's nothing you have to learn. You just have to be willing to do nothing if it takes that. I have a whole chapter on the benefits of procrastination.
Mhm. Yeah, I saw that. Maybe share with the audience a little bit about a procrastination, because today it's people assume procrastinating is like a poison and a terrible look in society. But tell us why it's different, or how can you leverage it for your benefit?
Mm. Well, in the context of this discussion, if you're simplifying your life, and I write about Thoreau, I write about Peace Pilgrim, people
Mhm.
really took this idea of simplification to an extreme and were able to live extremely memorable, I think, meaningful lives that positively influenced many, many people, and even like historical outcomes, like Thoreau's theory of nonviolence and civil disobedience was a great inspiration for Gandhi, who used it to help free India, and to some extent, anyway, from British colonialism. So this is a big deal, right? That
Mhm.
can actually utilize simplicity to find solutions that come to us. And one of the ways we can allow that to happen is to not do things and to allow ourselves to sit in that still space and procrastinate if necessary, if you want to call it that. Brenda Euland, she wrote a book on writing years and years ago that is still a classic. I think it's called On Writing, but I don't remember right off the top of my head. In any case, she coined a term, moodling. She says what you need to learn to do is moodle, and this is
Mhm.
basically letting your noodle wander and let things present themselves to you. And what will happen is your creativity will skyrocket when you do this and you get off of the fast track and the go 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 mentality.
Very true. Yeah, the soul has the answers, and I think another one too that is important is your idea of, and I am guilty of this. Soul is the idea of busyness, that it can be a negative thing. And again, I'm guilty of this. I'll do stuff like, oh, I got to do this. Well, I did answer 4 emails and I fill the cat bowl and this. I'll do all this busy stuff instead of the big project, or the idea I need to go into the room and meditate. Just to make myself feel better. So yeah, busyness is also a danger in our society, in our very busy society.
Right. I spell it busyness.
Mhm.
Obviously, this is also related to the concept of having a business where you stay busy doing something. Maybe it's to make money, maybe it's not. But in this case, your busyness is a sign typically of being decentered and needing to find your silence, needing to find your stillness. You know, really, people, it seems to me, automatically assume that stillness and silence are somehow weak
Mhm.
or less than, and yet they are amazingly powerful. Charles de Gaulle, the French president back in the 1950s, he said that silence was the most powerful weapon in the world.
Mm.
So I have a whole chapter where I get into silence and how we can use it to set boundaries, to resolve conflict, to get ourselves out of negative situations or harmful situations. I mean, there's so much to be said for silence, and when you combine it with the power of silence, when you combine that with the kind of simplification that we were talking about, that is an amazing recipe for beginning to pool more power. And when I say power, I really mean, pick your term, but it's chi, it's prana, it's
Mm.
kundalini, it's orgone, torsion, scalar, it's mojo, it's consciousness, it's the imagination. Ultimately, is what I believe it is. And this process of simplifying and going into stillness allows you to begin just recuperating all of this energy that is constantly being dispersed on purpose in the matrix. The matrix
Mm.
is designed to disperse this energy because it's being harvested. This is the energy of the imagination, the energy of consciousness, the energy of our attention, and it's constantly being harvested for other purposes than our own.
Well said indeed. And yeah, I always like this saying I read many years ago in monasteries. It said, do not disturb the silence unless you can improve it. And the older I get, the more I realize I can't improve it. I really can't. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in today, where you're almost forced to give an opinion or your insight or something like that. And we can get into the whole matrix control system, but I wanted to bring in Graham. Graham, what do you do to alleviate or manage as a researcher and somebody who's pretty plugged into what's going on in the world to manage the vast storms of information and keep yourself centered and not overwhelmed and just take it as it goes? What skills do you have or tricks?
I was going to say, as far as that goes, a lot of it just lifetime of experience. You know, your intuition tells you which is important and which isn't, and follow that trail until your intuition tells you to abandon it. As far as what you're saying about the busyness, I use what I call a two list system where it's like I focus on what can I impact today versus what I can't impact today. And then I make two lists. And what I can impact today becomes my to do list. And the other one, every time I think about it, I kind of metaphorically give myself a little kick in the butt to stop thinking about it because I can't do anything about that today. So why don't I do something that I can do something about? So that's kind of my methodology, Peg.
Yeah, that's a good one. What you can control and what you can't control. So, and but I think that's one of the central themes of your book, isn't it, Saul? Is the idea that even though we might want to detach and not give our energy to these beings and the system they've created, but we all are important and can make a difference. I think there's a part where you write, we're more than capable of waving our wands over the manifest world and making its madness disappear. But first, we have to realize that we're born wizards, each and every one of us. There are no muggles here. So, your central message is that we all can be wizards or hobbits. We all can change the course of history.
Yeah, I don't know about hobbits. Certainly wizards, although I do love the Hobbit and I love Tolkien. But yeah, the Harry Potter reference is I use a lot of pop cultural references in the book to just make it seem relevant to today, and I also combine those with lots of references to classical literature and scholarship and that kind of thing. So yes, that's absolutely my message: is that we all have the same capability to increase our personal power to such an extent that we can perform miracles.
For sure. But that's the key. I think a lot of the problems we have today is people feel hopeless because the old ways don't work. I see people that if they post 20 times on Facebook against whatever political party they hate, it's going to work. Or if they write their congressman 20 times, it's going to work. Or if they go march. I mean, there are systems that don't seem to work anymore. and I hear it in their voices. They seem to be very hopeless, and I think your book offers a way where you can regain your power, right? Part of it is, again, go inward, find your inner magic, and express to the world in a world to make a difference. I mean, is that it, or what else?
Well, there's methodology to it. There are probably many ways of doing what I'm describing if you catalog different approaches to so-called enlightenment across the globe, right? Or the
Mhm.
plane or whatever this is. But what I'm describing is a specific consciousness technology that has been referred to as inner alchemy. And there are specific techniques that you can engage in that are the doings of this book. So if you think about the book being roughly divided into two parts, unofficially, one is the not doings, and we could cover some other not doings.
Sure.
We did mention simplification, we did mention silence, procrastination. Then there are the doings, and the main things that I recommend that people consider doing involve consciously, purposely reclaiming our energy that we've lost to past and even theoretical future timeline timeline situations where we've actually been traumatized and that has bled out our energy. So you can go and recuperate that using shamanic techniques such as recapitulation or some of the energy absorption and reabsorption techniques that I described that are associated with inner alchemy, or sometimes you could even make a connection to more like Eastern internal alchemy, because there is certainly a connection. But what I'm describing is more of a Western alchemical tradition of inner alchemy, where you are learning to build your power by projecting your consciousness into the past or the future. You can even project it into the present if you're having, let's say, an argument with somebody. You can
Mhm.
draw in the energy that's being loosed out of you right then and there, and you will witness miracles if you can summon the chutzpah to do this, because you will stop the argument in its tracks. It is an amazing phenomenon. It is the ultimate conflict resolution, because the conflict can only happen if part of the energy fueling it is coming from you. And when you take that back in, you basically withdraw your consent for the argument to exist. So imagine going back into your past and doing a kind of inventory of your life. This is a process that you can do for weeks and months and years. You can revisit things. You can do it in a haphazard way, whatever presents itself, or you can do it in order. But you learn how to project that consciousness back to the time when you experienced the trauma or the loss, whatever we're looking at, and there's a way of drawing that energy back into your body, and then taking that energy and moving it down into your solar plexus area, and then packing it very tightly in that area with your intention, using your willpower. And as you do that, what you're actually beginning to accomplish is the creation of the Philosopher's Stone. It's
Mhm.
not some little Harry Potter rock that grants immortality to the bearer. It is something that anyone can create inside their body. It's a concentration of your life force, basically.
And
And
this will,
as
I'm
you
sorry.
develop that, then that can empower or power up your ability to broadcast or project your consciousness, and then you get better at drawing in the energy, which then feeds your ability to broadcast your consciousness, and so on and so forth. As you become like the Ouroboros, the serpent consuming its own tail, you're just growing and growing and growing through this process.
Very cool. Yeah, talk about becoming sovereign again. And this is similar. Of course, you mentioned Jung and so forth. This is similar to integrating your complexes, integrating and understanding and integrating your shadow, and all these work. I mean, all these mystics, so they kind of say the same thing with different language. I mean, it's this is a perennial wisdom, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, I do write about shadow work, the shadow self. I also write about the deeper shadow that is involved in this process. But what I would say that makes this different from a lot of things that I've read, even in Jung's work, is that this is not really a mental process. This is back to the simplification and getting out of the over intellectualization that we're experiencing as a culture that is literally ossifying our tissues as we sit in front of our computers consuming useless information. Okay. And
Mhm.
I know this because another thing that I do is I teach a certain kind of fascia work where you can decompress and release your fascia, and people are just becoming frozen. Their bodies are just freezing up, and that's contributing to very rapid aging and lots of conditions having to do with deterioration that are, unfortunate and unnecessary in my opinion. So you're actually doing something very specific to heal your trauma, and it doesn't matter whether you understand it. That's the thing. I mean, you might understand it, but you might not understand it, if you want to distinguish between those terms a little bit. What I'm trying to say, to kind of break it down, is that you are paying attention to the movement of energy into your feelings, your internal sense of the energy that was lost. As you do that, you do get better at visualizing what happened, or at least feeling it very intensely, and then you're able to draw that back in. But it is not in any way your responsibility to understand some of the shit you went through to profit from, to benefit from this technique.
Interesting. No, I was going to say one of the following up on the whole perennialism idea. It sounds to me like you're exploring your own version of that universal truth. And one of the, I'm curious how much you see echoes in what you've gone through and what you've theorized with like the old mythological phoenix, or especially Castaneda's eagle. I hear a lot of Castaneda echoed in your stuff, and I don't know if he was an influence or just he walked a parallel path with you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Very nested question, pun intended, I guess, with the eagle.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
The I mean, I write about Castaneda a fair amount in this book. So, I think I cite 5 or 6 of his books. I mentioned Magical Passes, lots of different, and the recapitulation is out of Castaneda. And I mentioned his work and Taisha Abelar's work and the way they taught the recapitulation. And I have a few tweaks and suggestions that I've been able to implement with my own practice of recapitulation, which is basically breathing in the energy that you lost in usually past circumstances. So it's related to the energy reabsorption, but it's not exactly the same. And I suggest that energy reabsorption is much more powerful than recapitulation. So because it has a final step that has to do with the packing, basically, and the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, so that it allows you to kind of use different visualization and breathing techniques to draw in this energy. But then what do you do with the energy? Well, you've got to put it somewhere, or it's going to get taken again, or you're just going to dissipate it. You're going to kind of piss it away, because that's what we do,
Mhm.
unless we have a system for containing and warehousing this stuff. So so I'm definitely suggesting there's more to it than just reabsorbing it. And in both cases, I don't think anyone's asking the person recapitulating or reabsorbing to understand what happened necessarily. In fact, that just seems irrelevant, really, to have an intellectual understanding, when what really matters is the primal, quote unquote, reality of that movement of energy that was lost, that's yours. So it's up to you to go get it and pull it back into your system. And when you're creating the Philosopher's Stone, in essence, what you're doing is creating a facsimile of yourself in your body, of your energy. It is you on a multidimensional, greatly expanded level. And in terms of the Phoenix, obviously I created something called the Phoenix Center for Regenetics. The Phoenix has been with me for decades, this very important figure, and I've written about it and theorized about it. But there is a stage of the alchemical process on the other side of death. We could talk about what that means, when you
Mhm.
have an opportunity to become the phoenix. and fly past the eagle.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Yeah, let's talk about the idea of death and getting to the other side. I know that's an important theme, and of course, a very important theme in shamanism in general.
Yeah, I know it's really hard for some people to talk about this,
Yeah.
and you know, it can be painful and very triggering, and I apologize if that's the case. And I suggest that it's the case to some extent because our culture doesn't want us really looking at that um, with any balance and any mental health. It wants us to just freak out over death and either ignore it or
Hmm.
make up fairy tales about what happens after death and call it religion. So that's my that's my 2 cents. Um, but in terms of the phenomenon of death, there does appear to be a kind of line drawn in the sand in this construct, the matrix, that we supposedly can't go beyond intact, and that's death, right? So
Hmm.
that's the party line. And we you know, we hear lines like or sayings like, you know, the only certainties in life are death and taxes, and all of this is just absolutely ingrained in us. And
Hmm.
yet all of our mythologies and even religions are just replete with figures who go beyond death, who die and come back, who
Yeah.
can come and go, you know, transcendent moments. I say sometimes it's a kind of transcendent immanence where there's this great embodiment that happens. This happens all the time, all over the world. So it's fascinating to me that on the one hand, when you know, us plebes talk about this phenomenon, we got to pay the taxes and die, but the gods, they can actually live forever, right? So
Hmm.
so the hero's journey is to become a demigod or a god, right? Where you get to live forever, basically. And there's a methodology around doing that. You can get out of here, you can build up your power enough so that you can actually choose your death in a conscious way. You can choose your moment of leaving this construct, of blowing this popsicle stand. And when you do that, you can then step into the facsimile body that you've created. It is associated with the Philosopher's Stone, and it's also called the dream body. You step into the dream body, and it's a body that you have created with the power of your attention and your ability to project your consciousness. And you've put basically energy into creating an egregore of yourself. Now,
Hmm.
having said this, I believe you yourself, you are an egregore. We are egregores. There are only egregores. I don't believe in a real anywhere. I believe that we're in a dream, and that all things are levels of a dream, and that even when you get all the way past the eagle and you know you're at the central sun, the eagle at the center of the galaxy, whatever that is, that's just a dreaming. We're talking about the dreaming god
Hmm.
just dreaming all of this into existence using the,
Right.
you know, maybe there's the, you have the primal force of creation that's flowing through that and is manifesting in kind of the cosmic principle of something like Shakti or something like that. Okay, whatever.
Hmm.
Those are the mechanics of how it works. But the upshot is that all is a dream. That's how we can create, because we can create things when we learn how to like lucid dream and that sort of thing. We can create extremely real phenomena, quote unquote real, so real that if you've ever had a very intense lucid dream, you might have woken up, you know, in tears, shivering, you might be having an orgasm. These things can just affect your body very, very intensely, and that's as real as it gets. So I suggest that this dream body is capable of having much more intense and subtle and powerful experiences than even our physical body in this construct.
Well said, and I would agree. Yeah, it reminds me of the Neoplatonism, the idea of Okama, the astral body, and the Gnostics talk about that too. I don't think they gave it a fancy name, but they just said preparing for the shamanistic journey, you will get this sort of different body that you can take through the levels of reality, levels of consciousness.
I mean,
So
there's
you would say, I'm sorry?
diamond body, light body, rainbow body.
Yeah, that's it.
Thousands and thousands of names for this thing, it seems to be. I mean,
Yeah, the
maybe not
Buddhists.
thousands, but it does seem like there are so many names cross culturally. I wrote about those in Conscious Healing years ago, and it's always fascinated me that that people who supposedly had no contact with each other, who had different languages, different customs, different religions and mythologies, ended up telling the same stories about where we are and how we get out of here.
Yeah, exactly. Same, the entering the timeline of universals and into the world of archetypes and myths, and these are very, yeah, very similar stories. When you mean shamanistic, I know that word gets thrown around. What do you mean by it, Saul?
You mean in terms of the techniques I was mentioning earlier?
Yeah, you say shamanistic.
Well, specifically, recapitulation was a technique that was supposedly taught to Castaneda by his
Mhm.
teacher, Don Juan Matus, who a lot of people think was just a figment of Castaneda's imagination. And I always say this: fact or fiction, who cares?
Yeah,
Everything is a figment of the imagination,
bingo.
including your most objective concepts.
Mhm,
Ultimately,
mhm.
um, you
Yeah,
know, and there was a recent little interview where I said something, something like, it was like subjective mind is creating that objective mindset, keeping it from seeing the subjectivity of its objectivity.
love it. Yeah,
So
exactly.
really, I'm very specifically referring to something that was taught in that lineage of shamanism. And there's
Mhm.
another version of that it has been written about by an author named Sergio Magana in The Toltec Secret. He writes about the tall lineage of Mesoamerican shamanism, which is not the same thing as the Toltec. They are apparently kind of parallel lines. And so
Mm,
he had his own teachers who went back supposedly generation upon generation, and were bringing through or transmitting all of this very old consciousness technology for doing the types of things we're talking about, and learning how to lucid dream, which he calls blossom dreaming. And he has his own way of doing recapitulation, which is where you use masks, and you put a mask on and you stand in front of the mirror and you tell your life story to your mask face,
love it.
and you do it 30 minutes a day for 30 days. And the funny thing is that as you do this, the story becomes more and more ridiculous and absurd, and you begin to detach from it, and eventually, very often, you just run out of anything to say before the 30 days are up, and you can just stand in silence in front of the mirror, completely detached from your face and your past and who you are. And it allows you, in a kind of psychological way, to start your life over again, to reinvent yourself. It's very,
Mm,
and of course, it can bring in a lot of energy. I feel that in terms of this discussion, where we're talking about amassing personal power, that the recapitulation method of going back into the past and breathing back in your trauma and your power, that's the more effective way to do what I'm describing. But I would highly recommend people get Magana's book and experiment with these masks. I got a couple of the Commedia dell'arte masks, the
mm,
sad and happy face,
yeah,
and I would alternate between these masks. And one day I would do like the happy face, and the next day I would do the sad face, and it was really trippy. I have to say it was actually trippy at times.
I bet. As long as you didn't say Candyman 3 times, you'll be fine, so
Or red rum, red rum.
yeah, of course, Red Rum, yes, that's another one. So, yeah, that's awesome, yeah, for the audience, it's all in his book, and these things, I've seen them worked, and they are part of a tradition that will help you if you need healing and anchoring into a better reality and finding a better version of yourself. But switching it around to the quote unquote bad guys. And we did talk about this on when we discussed this in December. But tell us about the dragon and the matrix control system. What are these concepts that you bring in the book?
Well, I know the matrix control system, I believe, is a phrase that Tom Montauk
Mhm.
that he coined. And he and I are actually going to be doing an interview or a chat sometime in May. So that'll be
Cool. I love
more.
his work. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I cite his work in the book, and I should probably back up a little bit and let people know that my previous nonfiction book that you and I discussed on this channel was called The World, Cult, and You. And it
All
was
right.
basically a warm up to Get Out of Here Alive in many ways. And in that book, I theorized that the world is a series of kind of interconnected and nested cults that are designed to control people's minds, that govern the mente, and
Mm-hmm.
to harvest our energy, that we're basically sheeple on a loosh farm. Now, having said that, I also went to great lengths to let people know that I was not suggesting that we are in some kind of soul trap necessarily, or that we are helpless here, or that that we're on a kind of rinse and repeat recycling operation.
Right.
It's very my understanding of all of that is rather different from what you see in the mainstream, and I would suggest that the fact that those ideas are so mainstream should give you pause. Just
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to leave it there. So. Where was I going with that? Well, I went back to the dragon. So in The World, Cult, and You, I talked about the notion that there is like a great parasite that is feeding on human energy, and this would be the archons. This is the demiurge, or the whole archontic Borgian collective, however you want to look at that. So the hive mind that is feeding on people's energy. But when I got to Get Out of Here Alive, I was working with the hero's journey motif, and I needed a different metaphor for what this thing is, or how to describe it. So I chose the dragon. The dragon is the guardian to the cave of our shadow. It's the guardian to the point at the edge of the construct, that where we can actually leave the construct. We have to face and defeat the dragon on our hero's journey to get out of here alive. That's the whole principle. And literally, I suggest that the dragon is. I cite a wonderful article by a friend and colleague of mine, Brendan Murphy, who wrote about archons in Stranger Things. It's something I
Yeah.
republished on my Substack. And so he basically compares this dragon to the mind flayer in
Mm.
Stranger Things. So that's one way of looking at it, this Dungeons and Dragons character. Also,
Right.
you could think of it as maybe being something like Cthulhu,
Mm-hmm.
the H.P. Lovecraft old one, who sort of feeds on human energy. I know that John Kreiter, who has been a great influence and inspiration for my work and this book, he he theorizes that we're looking at a being from the dream world, from the Nakwal outside of the Tonal where we live, that has basically found this bright little planet full of our energy, and it's
Mm-hmm.
set up this loosh farm, this mind flayer, but that in some at least subtle body sense, like with its subtle body, its astral body, something like that, it literally is down in our oceans. And I cite Jules
Mm-hmm.
Verne, the French author, in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, who suggests that we don't really know what's down there. There could be multi-thousand-year-old creatures in this
Oh, yeah.
environment that we just don't even know anything about, really. So, and that hasn't changed all that much, even though that book is kind of old. So I've entertained the possibility, as freaky as it may sound, that the Lord Archon is here and is actually down somewhere in the ocean, and and
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty wild to think about. So I know that there's more to say about this, but I don't want to monologue, because I'd like to segue and get into some of the ideas about the dragon, and kind of deconstruct some preconceptions around that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, and you're right. The 90, we still, what, 90% of the ocean has not been explored. Who knows what's there? Maybe it's Atlantis, like you said. Maybe these other forms of creatures that are there. With the Giza pyramid news, there's so much more we are just discovering, but I think it's sort of a cosmic law again, going back to myths, whether you're talking about the Gnostics and the Archons, the Anunnaki, the Olympians, the Nephilim, and you find these in indigenous cultures in South America. Carlos Castaneda, his ideas of the predator and the flyer. I mean, this is cosmic and has been seen through all cultures, and it's probably true. I would say so, right? There are these beings coming in, and we're on the menu. Meat is back on the menu, going to the back to the Lord of the Rings.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
Human luge is back on the menu.
That's right. Absolutely. I think this is an actual phenomenon, and when we're not allowed to talk about it in a calm, cool, and collected way, if people like freak out about it or they just go into total denial, it's very unproductive. But let's just assume this is what's going on. All right. It would explain the controlled chaos of the world, because the archon, the dragon, would use this technique to destabilize human interactions and produce the emotional outbursts that give it its energy that it then feeds on.
Mm-hmm.
And these outbursts are also a loss to our ability to maintain our own consciousness at a certain level. So we get stupider the more that we're loosed,
Mm-hmm.
and we then fall into the place of reason where we're trapped in this empirical materialistic box, and we don't realize that we're just being extremely dumb and not being able to see what's going on, and we make fun of other people who can see what's going on.
Yeah.
It's wild. I mean, it's really really wild. It's brilliant. It's diabolically brilliant. The dragon is so brilliant. I honor that brilliance because it is amazing. And I also believe, Miguel, that it's really the dragon is our teacher here in many ways. In the
Very
sense
true.
of in the sense that this is like a dojo. I mean, people use the
Mm.
classroom analogy. We could talk about that, but I like to think of it as a dojo. And it's a
Yeah.
tough love dojo. It's like Morpheus gets Neo in that dojo and just kicks his ass until Neo can figure out how powerful he is and begin drawing back in his energy. If you want to, because I use the metaphor of the Matrix throughout this book, and
Mm.
that's what we're talking about. So really, if we can stop being such victims and just lamenting the fact that we have this predator in our midst that we can't do anything about, and we're just going to reincarnate and recycle back in endlessly and all of that, just hogwash really, then we can begin to empower ourselves, because we can learn to start feeding on the energy of the dragon. It may Other than the earth itself, it's the most powerful energy and most abundant energy source we have available to us. And we can actually learn to feed on its intent. And
Mm.
then we can purify that energy and we can use it to create our own philosopher's stone that will be like a nuclear generator inside of us that will allow us to fly this coop and turn into the phoenix and sail through eternity.
Oh, beautifully said. And yeah, here. I mean, as Castaneda said, there is a predator in our midst. And again, resenting this being or this force, whatever you want to call it, that is not the solution out of here. The solution, as you're saying, is be a trickster like those heroes of the myths that's what they ultimately were those Odysseus or Heracles or some native out there in the woods. That's how we do it. And I think too, Saul, we don't even have to, people don't want to go as cosmic as we're going. We can just do the as above, so below, right? I mean, this technique is used from politicians to religions to schools, right? The divide and conquer, feed off of our attention. I mean, it pervades everything in our society, in our mind. Our own egos are dragons, mini dragons sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And literally, the idea here is that the modern person, the modern human, and I know some people don't like that term, but I just don't have a better one right now. Um,
Well, at least he didn't say man. Then the feminists would come after you.
Modern man is, right. Yeah, that'll get you shot pretty
Yeah,
fast.
yeah.
So the idea here is that the mind we think of as our own mind, the conscious mind, is actually the mind of the dragon.
Mhm.
And that we are using its operating system just like we're using, Microsoft, or what was used to be Bill Gates's Microsoft uh, Word program to write our thoughts, to script
Mhm.
our reality. And it's a foreign operating system, a foreign installation, and there's only so much you can do with it because it's really designed to keep your mind in a trap. The best thing you can do is clean it up, and you can do that with simplicity and silence and getting your energy in order and that kind of thing. This, you want to clean it up. There's a whole methodology in shamanism and Castaneda. They call it sweeping the tonal, sweeping the little area of the tonal. That's
Mhm.
one way of looking at it. The what I'm describing doesn't necessarily involve that kind of shamanism. You can use the reabsorption techniques and that kind of thing, and the ability to project, because every time you project out of the construct into the dark sea of awareness that surrounds us, you're basically being bathed in the healing foundational energies of the unconscious mind.
Mhm.
Going back into the dream time, literally, where we used to be before we got this operating system. So the operating system came about when the snake entered the garden. That's the dragon. Part of us invited it in because we wanted to be more. We wanted to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And the dragon gave us that fruit. And in exchange for that, we were required to accept its operating system so that we could experience a form of limited consciousness and individuality that would allow us to have a different life, a different way of being. And that was the beginning of the end, as it were, as we kind of slid down the rabbit hole into this very fixed place where we think we know everything, but we know nothing.
Indeed, and I would agree. Yeah, looking at the chat, I like what a Be Done With It is saying, and I agree, or I don't agree, but he's talking about mind flayers were big lore in Baldur's Gate 3. I want to play Baldur's Gate 3. I played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 like 20 years ago. Go back, and you're talking about Stranger Things, and it is true, as people have noticed, it's gotten more and more Gnostic. Like in the last season, you find out that 11 created Vecna. So you've got right there the myth of the demiurge, where Sophia creates Yaldabaoth and puts him in this world of shadow, and he creates his minions, the mind flayers, and so forth.
Absolutely.
So these guys are tapping into very primordial things. So yeah, I might have to try Baldur's Gate 3, maybe as a reward when I finish this first draft of the Bowie book, which should be very soon. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And Graham, what do you think? Do you have a question for Sol or a remark?
Actually, yeah, I do. Is I'm sitting here and listening to, his description there, and I'm comparing it to the classic Joseph Campbell hero's journey, where it tracks, and this is the same thing Castaneda wrote about it. I believe his book was The Power of Silence, but it's the same tracking with Campbell's hero journey up until the battle with the dragon. And it seems like with Campbell, what he's saying is in his hero's journey is the hero takes the treasure and then returns to the people in the village and shares it with them. And in Castanet and yours is basically I referred to it as the trickster's journey. And instead you take the treasure and you exit stage up the Buddhist way.
Yeah.
Am I accurate? And how do you reconcile the difference between the two? Tag.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And the way I reconcile is that people do both. Like when you have all of these very interesting alchemist-like figures, people like Saint Germain, these are probably people who are coming and going to some extent. And some of these people are actually, I believe, coming back and helping people on this journey at times in maybe subtle ways. I don't have proof of that. It's just a deep intuition that I have about how that works. Eventually, however, the idea is to go on because there is so much to explore. There's so much out there. And really, in the final analysis, you can't really help other people. You can only show the way. You can only point to the door. We're back to the Matrix again. So I think that whereas yes, the trickster part of that, it's an interesting way of looking at it, and I love the trickster archetype. So don't get me wrong, but I don't necessarily think that flying the coop here is an act of selfishness. It's really an act of way showing.
Hmm. Yeah, if somebody writes a story about your adventure, you become a myth, or you're in the stars. Yeah, that's pretty good. You're right there. You've shown people, and like you said, people aren't going to sober up until they admit it. They admit they have a problem. As the Buddhists say, you just got to spread the seeds around and walk away. And if somebody wants your gnosis, they'll come to you, right, Saul? There's no and
Yeah,
I guess it brings me. You don't want to become the dragon, right? By beating people over the head with your insight.
it's true. I mean, ultimately, I guess none of this really matters. I mean, what matters? That's a very open-ended question. I believe that, and belief is loaded. Okay. I believe based on my own internal gnosis. So belief being something that I've chosen rather than something that I'm copycatting somebody. I feel very strongly that that we that there is ultimately a way for all of us to go back home, that we will all eventually make our way out of here one way or another. If that's transcending death or having an alternative form of death and dying, that's one possibility. Other people will eventually make their way past or into the eagle, and whatever that means. I believe what that actually means is that their consciousness is cycled, their energy is, but not necessarily back into this place as the same soul.
Hmm.
I actually don't feel that souls pre-exist this place. I think that souls are made here.
Oh,
Very much in
interesting.
very much in the tradition of John Keats and his idea of the veil of soul making. So the idea is that we are an energy and we come in and we might have elements of other souls and even potentially previous incarnations, but that we're not ensouled at that point. This crucible is designed to do that. And then we can go through the process of, as that happens, of individuating and going on the hero's journey. But the idea that we are always already eternally a soul, I disagree with.
Hmm. Yeah, very interesting. Almost unique. Can we compare this to any other tradition? You said John Keats?
John Keats, the great English
Yeah,
romantic writer, he
right.
in his letters that he wrote, many of which he wrote, in this particular letter, I believe he wrote when he was dying of tuberculosis in Rome. So he was contemplating his own mortality, and those letters are among the most beautiful things you will ever read. He wrote a long uh, letter about what he called the veil of soul making. A lot of times people think that's VEIL, but it's actually VALE, like the valley of soul making.
Oh.
All right. So this is a letter that he wrote to his brother and sister-in-law in 1819, and he said, basically, if I could find that little, it's so beautiful. I don't think I can pull that up because I don't have a searchable function in here. But he's basically uh, digging deep and in the face of his mortality, suggesting that the soul is not this eternal individualized thing.
Hmm.
It's something that is part of the oversoul, perhaps,
Mm.
and that it will change upon death because it will be essentially reabsorbed by the oversoul. That's
All
the
right.
implication of this.
Yeah, it's very beautiful, and of course, these ideas have been batted around. The idea of some have said there's a difference between the spirit and the soul. The soul is like the television, the spirit is like the waves that come in, and some souls don't make it, some advance, and so forth. So, These are, yeah, fun to speculate, but like you said, keep it simple. What can we do today? And one thing you do today in your book, Saul, which you've been talking quite a bit now, and often it gets you in some hot water, is your critiques of the truthers. And again, I think, yeah, tell us about that, because unfortunately, I don't think people are not listening, and I think you're true. You're speaking the truth about the truthers.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people say, "What do you mean by truther?"
Yeah, that's true.
And I have a fairly simple definition back to my keeping it simple mandate, and that is that a truther is anybody who believes in a pre-existing or independently existing reality outside their own perception of it.
Hmm.
And therefore, in that way of looking at things, the truth and the solutions to our problems lie outside the self,
Hmm.
out there, not in there. So, the agentry, sovereignty, all of those things are ultimately all discourse and palaver. What's that? Palaver, isn't that the word? Notwithstanding, that mentality lends itself to basically ceding power to some outside force. It's a way of looking at the world that you might call a kind of Newtonian model, a material Cartesian model,
Hmm.
many ways. So it's not really just about one school on the internet or this type of podcast or this type of content. It's more like a world view. So that's what a
Hmm.
truther really is. Now, within the sphere of YouTube, for example, you have all of these channels. Yours is one of them, where a lot of people talk about their versions of reality and their truth, right? So there's an amazing moment in I believe it's in Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels, where he's making fun of these philosophers at the academy on one of the places that Gulliver visits, and they don't believe that you can communicate with words, so they carry around big bags of things, and if they want to talk with each other, they just reach in the bag and they get the thing they're talking about, right? It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have to use approximations of things, and we call those things words, right?
Yeah.
And so in order to discuss ideas, so obviously, I'm not saying that doing your research is necessarily a bad thing. I think if all you do for the rest of your life is your research, then you're missing out on the opportunity to get out of here alive.
Hmm.
I will say that, because the research ultimately is a runaround that leads nowhere, because everything leads nowhere in this matrix except the one true path out of it, which is the path inward. That is the hero's journey. So we can talk about what's supposedly out there all day long, and it might be fascinating. And certainly it can create lots of division and lots of drama, but it won't necessarily do anything to help us.
No, and it won't certainly provide the way to maximize your service in this world. I think, putting it simply, Saul, could I say it this? When you're talking about truthers, it's simple. No one's coming to save you. That's what I say.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the idea of white hats and black hats and gray
Yeah,
hats.
it's like Trump's not gonna save you, Musk's not gonna, AOC's not gonna save you, the Pope, Richard Dawkins, whatever, your guru out there, nobody's coming. You have to save yourself. The Christ within, the hope, the glory, as Paul said, and that's where you start. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the main message of this book. That's why
Mhm,
I say over and over again, the only way out is in. And I have a dozen different ways of phrasing that and framing it so that people might begin to really get it, not just intellectually, but to begin to feel the truth of what I'm saying. And
mhm,
me, one of the best ways of doing that is to simply start unplugging and simplifying and going into the silence and doing the extremely frictionless things that I propose, to see how you feel when you're doing them. Where does your consciousness go? What do you begin to realize about your life and the world? when you sit in those spaces of silence. I'm really not talking about meditation. This is not meditation. Nothing I'm talking about is what I would define as meditation. it's
Hmm.
it's much more loosey goosey and active in some ways than meditation. It's more individualized and creative. It doesn't have a lot of rules in many instances, and you can make a lot of this stuff up. And in fact, I suggest you can make all of it up. You could do versions of the things that I'm teaching that are actually quite different, and they might still work for you.
Hmm. For sure, yeah, and yeah, agreed 100%. And I was looking at your Substack today, and I ran into this, which is, of course, a theme of your book. Well, especially the title, but we bring up Mr. Morrison, and there he's pointing at us and going, "Whoever controls the media controls the mind." So Morrison is warning us about the dragon and all of his employees down in the managerial class, right? The big bureaucracy.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, obviously this book starts with my experience of visiting Morrison's grave in Paris
Yeah.
and and having my own meditations on death. I was very sick at the time, and
Mm.
um uh no, at the time later I was sick. The first section, we partied there a lot with all the people who would show up at Morrison's grave to party in Père Lachaise. Later, I went back when I was ill, and I was contemplating some of the things I had experienced there before. But, you know, I know a lot of people look at that image and they say, well, he was like an MK Ultra baby. He was one of the, one of these Monroe. I don't know what it was. It was the whole like Laurel Canyon crowd and
Right, right.
all of the stuff they were doing out there. That's really what it was. And I get so tired of hearing that kind of thing. You can say something negative about anybody, but try doing this one time. Try saying anything about what you perceive as reality that can't be debunked. Try
Exactly.
it. Just give it a try, and then just let people just be whoever they are. That would be my suggestion. So I think he had a lot to teach. He was a troubled, tortured soul. No, I
Yeah.
don't necessarily think he faked his death or anything like that. I don't think he and Elvis are sitting, on some island somewhere. I just don't believe that. Anyway, but maybe they are, and maybe if enough people believed it, they would,
Yeah, they'll appear.
they'll appear. So, in any case, the idea here is the media is just one aspect of a much larger control system for the mind. That's whole matrix control system that we were talking about earlier. And the dragon really utilizes our need to look to others to decide what to believe to establish what is true and right. So if you've ever heard of a guy named Rene Girard, this
Oh,
wonderful
yeah.
philosopher who had a theory of mimetic desire that went into all of this just in tremendous detail. This is how the construct works to control the mind and to divide and conquer us.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah, Gerard's amazing. And there was actually a documentary that just came out, I believe, theorizing if Jim Morrison survived, and he did survive, or he faked his death, whatever, and now he's living in Syracuse, and people are like, why the hell would he end up in Syracuse, New York? Why not the Bahamas or the islands of Greece? So people aren't buying it, but it's again interesting. And I don't know if you ever saw that movie. Well, it's in my book, The Occult Elvis Soul, the Death Becomes Her, with Bruce Willis and
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Goldie Hawn, and yes, Elvis and Jim Morrison make that movie as two people who survive with this potion and all that. So
That's
yeah,
great.
Gold,
That's great.
silly movie, Meryl Streep, Goldie Hawn, but it was fun. It was fun. So
Yeah, I like the tongue and cheekness of all that. That's good stuff.
mhm. Yeah, for sure. And honestly, if you ask me, I would say looking at all the data, even from an objective side, I would say I don't think Jim Morrison was MK Ultra or CIA. His dad, of course, that's another story, but you know, maybe that's why he's so messed up with a dad like that who needs archons, right? Soul,
Yeah,
destroy
yeah.
your mind.
Also, it's just but it's also kind of a smear campaign. People can say, well, he was MK Ultra, right? And that's supposed to
Yeah.
stop the discussion, and that's supposed to encapsulate the totality of his personality. And so
Right, right. Negate his art.
know
No,
about this person who was enormously gifted.
no.
It's just one of the ways that we act like such entitled children when we start saying things like that.
Yeah, reductionistic. It just
Mhm.
people are complex. Everybody casts a shadow, and at the end of the day, who knows? Do what you can. I mean, I'm sure sometimes, Saul, you've wondered, am I working for the dragon? I've always wondered, maybe I am working for the CIA, and I wouldn't even know it. Right? I wouldn't even know it.
Yeah, there's truth to that. Yeah,
They
one
could
never.
just, yeah, you don't know. You are heaven and hell are within us, as they say. So awesome. Well, this has been a great discussion. Graham, do you have any last questions or remarks before we set off on our own hero's journey on this spring equinox?
Pretty much, I wish everybody best of luck with their own battle with the dragon.
Hmm. Exactly, but that's where the treasure is.
Exactly.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I've got it over here. Let me pull it up for those of you who are subbed watching on Patreon or will be watching on Patreon and the Discord and some other channels. Here is Saul's Substack. He's always putting out content every day, and it's always great stuff from videos to graphics to articles. So definitely check it out. As some of you know, I already started mine, the occultelvis.substack. So we are growing our own little crazy family in those domains and spreading that information. And so beyond that, is that the best place where people can find your book, or where would you like to send them to get your new book?
Well, right now it's only available on Amazon. So wherever you can shop Amazon, that's where you would get it. I I'm the number one release in alchemy right now. It just came out today, and I think it was number three in the total alchemy category, and number five in something like energy healing or that kind of thing. So a few more purchases, and I should hit number one in one of those, and then I can say I was an Amazon bestseller. So
Hey,
yeah,
that's great for your first day.
help me
Yeah.
out. Yeah, that would be wonderful. You know, it's just it's in Kindle right now, so it's not in paperback. I am coming out with a paperback. I also am serializing the audiobook exclusively on my Substack. So come over and you can just start listening to the book. I've got the preface, the introduction, and chapter one up already.
Yeah, it's very nice. I was listening to it the other day. It's no, it's good poetry. It flows well, and it's good stuff. You can always tell if something sounds on audio. If it sounds good, then it's a good read, I say. But
Well, that means a lot coming from you. You're a very, very talented wordsmith.
oh, well, thank you very much. Yeah,
Right.
had to pull that one, had to pull that one out soon. I can't help it. I can't help falling in love with that voice. So, what are you gonna do? So awesome. And you say, are you working on anything else in the future, or would you say you're gonna take a pause? Or
Well, I'm in the process of rolling out the various exercises that make up this new body work, breath work, energy work called pragmalchemy that's
Mm.
exclusively on my Substack. So I'm spending time just writing up the descriptions, the how-to of the exercises, how to go about actually doing some of the things that I talk about in the book. So that's a an ongoing project. My goal is to bring out about one exercise per month for my subscribers.
Wonderful, useful stuff. We need it more than ever. We need to go inward. We need to not let these archons and dragons divide and conquer us. And we need to touch grass and, like you said, simplify it. So I'm very happy your book is out there. I highly recommend it for the audience. You're going to find important information, exercises, and which way you need to pivot so you can get out of here alive instead of what Jim Morrison once said, but his famous quote, "No one here gets out alive." But So awesome. Well, we are at the end. First, I'd like to say, yeah,
This is
for
the
those.
end, Miguel.
This is the end. There we go. Somebody had to pull it out. Somebody had to pull it out. God, yeah. Hey, it's one of the best scenes ever in Hollywood. You got the beginning of Apocalypse Now. It's
Absolutely.
emblematic of the human condition. So brilliant move by Coppola on that one.
And I love the smell of napalm.
Yeah, of course. Oh my God, that movie is just, I think I've watched it 20 times. It's just brilliant everywhere you look at it. So indeed. Well, Graham, thanks for keeping us company on this very amazing chat as always.
Always my pleasure. It's a blast. Thanks for everything, Saul.
I appreciate that, Graham. Thank you so much.
Looks like the cat. I don't know if the cat got your tongue or the dragon got your throat. One of the two.
I was delivered a Mexican coffee, and I
Oh.
got some cayenne down my throat.
Oh wow! Oh wow! Well, there you go.
But it's tasty.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It tasted good. So, well, awesome, Sol. Well, yeah, enjoy your coffee. We appreciate everything you do, and good luck with your book and all your future projects.
Hey, thank you, and thank you for having me, and good luck with your upcoming book. The Occult Elvis is a heck of a book.
Thank you. Yes, you did get a review, and I do appreciate your review. You can find Sol's stellar review at the website, at his Substack. So check it out. It's amazing. So, yes, but we are at the end for now. And as I always say, write your own gospel, live your own myth. Take care, everybody.